at the heart of American influence. Meanwhile, a facility raising fears of wider consequences in the ongoing war. And in the U.S., Donald Trump is threatening to deploy troops to Baltimore to clean up crime, a statement that reignited fierce debates over the law, order, and political power. From Gaza to Washington, from Kiev to Ankara, the world is watching, reacting, and bracing. But with so many voices clashing, whose voice will truly be heard? These and other international stories are up for discussion today on Worldview. Please stay tuned. Many thanks for joining us. We begin today from the Middle East, where Israeli planes and tanks pounded the eastern and northern outskirts of Gaza City overnight Saturday to Sunday, destroying buildings and homes, residents said, as Israeli leaders vowed to press on with the planned offensive on the city. Witnesses reported the sound of explosions non-stop overnight in the areas of Zator and Shajaya, while tanks shelled houses and roads in nearby Sarab neighborhood, and several buildings were blown up in the northern town of Jabalia. Fire lit the skies from the direction of explosion, causing panic, prompting some families to stream out of the cities. Others said they would prefer to die and not leave. The Israeli military said on Sunday that its forces have returned to combat in the Jabalia area in recent days to dismantle militant tunnels and strengthen control of the area. It also added that the operation there enables expansion of combat into additional areas and prevents Hamas terrorists from returning to operate in these areas. In the meantime, today, at least 15 people, including 4 journalists working for the international media, are reported to have been killed in an Israeli strike on the hospital in the southern Gaza Strip. A Reuters cameraman and an Associated Press journalist were among those killed in the attack at Nasser Hospital. Another journalist is reported to have worked for Al Jazeera. The Hamas-run civil defense said that several people were killed in an initial strike and others in a second, which happened as rescuers attended the scenes. The Israeli military and the Prime Minister's office said they had no immediate comment. In Yemen, a sharp escalation of regional tensions. Israeli warplanes struck multi-target in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a in what the Israeli military described as a direct response to missile attacks launched by Houthi forces towards Israel. According to a spokesperson from the Houthi-controlled Health Ministry, the airstrikes, which thundered across the densely populated capital, killed 6 people and wounded 86 others. The toll was confirmed in a statement posted on the social media platform X, formerly Twitter. The bombardment marks the latest episode in more than a year of tit-for-tat strikes between Israel and the Iran-allied Houthi rebels, a conflict that has emerged as a volatile front in the broader fallout from the Gaza war. According to the Israeli military, Sunday's operation targeted key infrastructure used by the Houthi, including a military compound housing the presidential palace, 2 power plant and a fuel storage facility. The statement did not specify whether any Houthi military leader were among the casualties. Videos shared on social media showed smoke rising over Sana'a and emergency crews running to aid civilians injured in the blast. Local residents described scenes of chaos and confusion as explosions shook neighborhoods already strained by years of war. Still, Israel has vowed to retaliate forcefully against any direct threat from Yemeni soil, not a broader regional conflagration. In Australia, Thousands have taken to the street across Australia in pro-Palestinian rallies following the government decision to recognize a Palestinian state. More than 40 protests were held nationwide on Sunday, with large crowds gathering in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. Organizers say around 350,000 people turned out, though police estimated just 10,000 in Brisbane and gave no figures for other cities. In Sydney, demonstrators waved Palestinian flags and chanted, "Free, free Palestine," calling for an end to what they described as genocide in Gaza. Organizers George Lee said the rallies were a demand for justice and for Australia to sanction Israel, with tensions rising and the street feeling. The question now is, how far will Canberra go? Still in Gaza, Turkey's First Lady Emine Erdogan has written to Melania Trump urging her to speak out on behalf of children in Gaza. The letter made public by Turkish authorities drew a parallel to Melania Trump's recent message to Vladimir Putin, where she raised concerns over Ukrainian children affected by war. In a letter dated Friday, Emine Erdogan wrote, "I have faith that the important sensitivity you have shown for the 642 Ukrainian children will be extended to Gaza as well." She called on the former First Lady to appeal directly to Israel's Prime Minister, describing it as a historic responsibility. The White House, however, is yet to comment. Let's move now to the Ukraine and Russia war scene, where Ukraine has launched one of its largest drone attacks yet on Russian territory, hitting key infrastructure and triggering safety concerns near a major nuclear facility. Russian officials say a blast broke out at the Ust-Luga fuel export terminal following the overnight strikes, while a reactor at the Kursk nuclear power plant was forced to halve its output after a drone damaged an auxiliary transformer. The attack came as Ukraine marked its Independence Day amid ongoing missile and drone warfare stretching along the 2,000-kilometer front. Russia's defense ministry claims 95 Ukrainian drones were intercepted across more than a dozen regions. Both sides continue to speak of peace, but with reactors rattled and old terminals burning, how close is Europe to a deeper crisis? Still in Russia, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says Russia has made what it calls significant concession towards a possible peace deal in its war with Ukraine. Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, Vance claimed President Putin is now willing to allow security guarantees for Ukraine meant to protect it from future Russian aggression. But the price remains high. Moscow is demanding Ukraine surrender the entire Donbas region, abandon any hopes of joining NATO, and bar all Westerner troops from its soil. Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov suggested a group of global powers, including members of the United Nations Security Council, could oversee any agreement. After years of war and thousands of lives lost, the question remains, is peace really on the table or just being pushed around it? In a related development, Russia and Ukraine have exchanged 146 prisoners of war each. In a rare moment of coordination between the two sides, more than 3 years into the conflict. The swap was mediated by the United Arab Emirates. Russia says it released soldiers are now in Belarus receiving medical and psychological care. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky confirmed the exchange on Telegram, sharing photos of smiling returnees, many held since the early days of the war in 2022. Among them, he said, was a journalist captured just a month after the invasion. Moscow also confirmed the return of 8 civilians from Ukraine's Kursk region. Also, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has voiced support for strong security guarantees for Ukraine as part of any future peace deal and says Canada is open to sending troops under such an arrangement. Carney made the remarks during his first visit to Kiev since taking office in March, standing alongside President Vladimir Zelensky during Independence Day commemorations in the capital. The visit comes as U.S. President Donald Trump leads renewed effort towards a negotiated end to the war with Ukraine and its allies working to shape a post-war security framework. Also present in Kiev, Trump's special envoy Keith Kellogg underscoring Washington's evolving roles in peace talks. Zelensky told the crowd in Sofia Square, "We are all working to ensure that the end of this war would mean the guarantee of peace for Ukraine." The two leaders also signed an agreement on drone co-production, and Kenya said Ukraine would receive more than $1 billion of Canadian dollars in military aid from a previously announced package next month. Still in the Middle East, Syria's officials have confirmed that upcoming parliamentary elections, the first to be held under the country's new Islamic administration, will not take place in the southern province of Sweden or in 2 other provinces due to ongoing security concerns. The decision follows deadly clashes in Sweden in July, where hundreds were reportedly killed in fighting between local Druze militias and Sunni Benoni tribes. Government forces were deployed to restore order in the region. The Jews, a religious minority with communities in Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, form the majority population in Sweden. The province has long experienced tension between the Jews and Sunni strife over land and resources. Local Jewish leaders who maintain control over much of Sweden have refused to accept the authority of President Ahmad al-Shara's government, labeling it as extremist. They have also rejected the presence of government forces, insisting on managing their province securities independently. Meanwhile, Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara is expected to address the UN General Assembly in New York in September in Shara. It could be recalled that Shara, who once pledged allegiance to al-Qaeda before severing ties in 2016, met with the U.S. President Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia in May in a bid to have sanctions on Syria lifted. In a separate development, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to deploy troops to Baltimore, escalating a clash with Maryland Governor Wes Moore after the Democrat invited him to join a safety walk in the city. Trump wrote on social media, and I quote, "If Wes Moore needs help like Gavin Newsom did in Los Angeles, I will send in troops, which is being done in nearby D.C., and quickly clean up the crime." The comment marks the latest flashpoint in the president's efforts to deploy National Guard troops to Democratic-led cities as part of what he calls a crackdown on crime. The use of military personnel for domestic law enforcement has joined fierce backlash from Democrats. One governor described this as an abuse of power. Trump has already deployed around 2,000 troops to Washington, D.C., a Democratic stronghold, on Sunday. The Guards also started to carry out weapons in Washington, D.C., the military added. Previously, their weapons were available if needed, but kept in the armory. After the break, we turn our pages to the Asian Pacific region where more than 500,000 ordered to evacuate as typhoon heads for Vietnam. Stay tuned for this and many more right after the breather. Many thanks for staying tuned. We move now to the Asian Pacific region where Vietnam has ordered more than 586,000 people to be evacuated ahead of the arrival of Typhoon Kajiki. The storm is already sparking winds of 166 kilometers and is expected to strengthen further before making landfall today, weather forecasters say. People from the central province of Thanh Hoa, Quang Tri and Hieu and Dang Na have been ordered to leave their homes. Flights have been cancelled and boats told to stay ashore. The storm is skirting past Hainan in China, where the country's weather agency said up to 320 millimeters of rain was forecasted. In Japan, a public support for Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has jumped significantly despite his ruling coalition losing its majority in July's parliamentary election. Approval for Ishiba's cabinet rose to 39%, up 17 percentage points from last month's survey, which was conducted shortly after the upper house election. Meanwhile, the disapproval rate dropped to 50%, down from 37% in July. The Boston support appears to be driven by recent development, including a new trade agreement with the United States and the government's plans to increase rice production in response to soaring prices. Following the election setback, Ishiba has pledged to remain in office, rejecting calls from some members of his Liberal Democratic Party to step down and take responsibility. In China, as China prepares for its largest ever military parade in Beijing next week, the spotlight will be more than just cutting-edge weaponry. The events will also highlight the advanced technology crucial for commanding, controlling and protecting its arsenal in any future conflict. Alongside hypersonic missiles, stealth aircraft and undersea drones, China will unveil systems like battlefield sensors on tanks, early warning radars, targeting systems and air defense lasers. This is aimed at demonstrating a modern, tech-driven force. Analysts also say the display is part of intimidation and also a strategic messaging path. Despite the scale and spectacular, questions remain over the true effectiveness of China's military. The People's Liberation Army has not seen major combat since its war with Vietnam in 1979, raising doubts about how well it could integrate these capabilities in real warfare. In the meantime, Chinese customs authorities say they have screened more than 600 million people entering the country over the past 5 years as part of effort to detect and prevent the spread of infectious diseases. Speaking at a press conference today, Zhua Zingli, Deputy Director General of China's General Administration of Customs, said more than 180,000 cases of infectious disease had been identified at the country's border during that period. Zhua said officials had also intercepted 5.25 million disease vectors, organisms capable of transmitting infections, and prevented the entry of over 30 types of vector-borne diseases. The screenings were carried out on inbound travelers, vehicles and vessels as part of measures developed during Beijing's strict zero-COVID policies, which the government says it is now redefined. Still in China, Chinese real estate giant Evergrande has been delisted from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, marking a dramatic end to what was once the country's largest property developer. At its peak, Evergrande was valued at over $50 billion and symbolized China's rapid urban boom. But its empire built on more than $300 billion in debt eventually crumpled, triggering a property crisis that continues to drag on the world's second-largest economy. The company's founder, Hugh K. Yang, once Asia's richest man, has seen his fortune collapse alongside the firm. He was fined earlier this year and banned from China's capital market for life after regulators revealed Evergrande had overstated its revenue by $78 billion. With 1,300 unfinished projects across hundreds of cities and a failed expansion into electric vehicles and football, Evergrande listing now stands as a cautionary tale of unchecked growth and its consequences. In Africa, Kilma Abreguado, a 30-year-old migrant wrongfully deported to El Salvador under former President Trump's immigration crackdown, has been ordered to appear before federal officials in Baltimore today and may face deportation again, this time to Uganda. Abreguado was released Friday from detention in Tennessee and returned to Maryland after over 5 months in custody, including time in a notorious El Salvador prison. U.S. officials have offered to deport him to Costa Rica if he pleads guilty to charges of transporting undocumented migrants. Without a plea, he could be sent to Uganda, which his lawyers described as a significantly more dangerous. He has pleaded not guilty, though plea negotiations are still ongoing. And with that, we wrap up our package for you on Worldview today. You can follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website at spectrumtvlive.ng. You've been watching Worldview on Spectrum TV. I am Emedion James. Thank you for watching.